Hey, welcome to Message Monday. I'm really glad you're tuning in this week. I want to do a part 2 on what we started last week in the conversation. And so I've titled today's reflection or today's message, I've called it, Our Conversation's Enough. You know, it's been almost 2 weeks since the horrific death of George Floyd at the manslaughter at the hands of police brutality. And the world has been responding. The world's been responding through various ways, protests and social media. But one major way the world's been responding is the conversation about Black Lives Matters, about race, about inequality, the imbalance of power has emerged to the forefront. And it's about time. If you're like me, I often want to just, when something's going on, I want to respond with action, like tangible. What can I do? What can I do? And so a lot of us have been watching the conversation. We've been dialoguing about it, talking about it. We've been listening to it, whether that's listening on conversations that have been recorded either on Instagram or we've caught it on the internet somewhere. Maybe you're just on the phone with friends or you're texting with friends about it. Maybe it's happening around the dinner table. But we're engaging with the conversation. And I've thought to myself, is conversation enough? Is it enough? Because we need lasting change. Come on. We don't need to have the conversation and let it go away and we move on and we don't see change. We need transformation and change in souls and systems. We desperately need it for our neighbors to the south in America, but also in our own nation and the nations of the world. We need dramatic, radical transformation. And you know, sometimes we wonder, well, is having conversation enough? Like, I want to get to action. I want to get to seeing this change. I want to participate. I want to get my teeth in it, right? And so I've been thinking on that because we're watching all these conversations take place. And then I was reminded in the scriptures this week, the Holy Spirit often will point things out to you. The Holy Spirit will bring things to light. The Holy Spirit will often highlight something and elevate it in your vision, in your reading, in your awareness. And often He's drawing your attention to something. And as I wrestle with that, like, God, we need change. Let's get active. I don't know, is the conversation enough? I felt like the Holy Spirit was showing us the power of conversation that leads to transformation. And we are desperate for transformation and change in souls and systems. And so He was pointing out, I really felt like the Holy Spirit was pointing out the power of conversation that results in the transformation. Watch this. There are moments that Jesus would have conversations with people that would dramatically change their soul, but in doing so, of changing their soul, it would transform the system. So in John 4, Jesus arrives at this well and He sits down and the disciples leave to go to town to get more supplies. And so while Jesus is there, a woman approaches the well to draw water. It's midday. Many of you know this story. Maybe not all of you, but it's called The Woman at the Well. And so Jesus is at the well and He starts to engage in conversation with the woman. He just starts to, he asks her to draw water for him and he engages in conversation. Many of us would read that face value and say, well, he's just talking to a bystander or a fellow citizen, a person at the same location he's at. There are things going on in that narrative that we need to understand, that Jesus is breaking multiple barriers in that moment. He's breaking through, He's overcoming, He's stepping over, he's pushing through these barriers of gender, of socioeconomic class, of religion, and He's breaking through all these barriers. And He starts to engage, so much so that when the disciples come back, they're pretty shook that He's talking to the Samaritan woman. They're pretty shook up. What happens though, then let's not miss this, what happens after Jesus has the conversation is there was radical transformation going on in her life, because there was also sin happening in her life and Jesus was calling her to a better future. And that's what we're longing for, is a better future for our nations, a better future for all people. And so He was calling her to a better future because she was caught in sin. She was stuck in it. And so what happens after the conversation is so much radical transformation happens in the woman so immediately because of the conversation that she goes back and there's immediate effects. There's immediate action on her part. One of the actions is she draws the entire town to come meet Jesus. And the result is many people, it says, come to believe in Jesus. There's immediate action. So some of us want to get to action, but we're skipping the conversation. Don't skip the conversation, because that's where the Holy Spirit often does radical transformation in souls. And sometimes it's happening in our soul, and we need it. Don't kid yourself. We need transformation. But it is happening in the person we're also having conversation with. Now, whether we're watching that conversation online, on some online platform, Instagram, YouTube, a live stream, or whether it's happening around the dinner table or on the phone or in person, we need it, and the person we're talking to needs it. We're all growing, and we all need to listen. Let's not skip the conversation, because the conversation will radically transform souls, which will transform systems. And so we see the woman, John 4, we see her get radically transformed. Then we get to Luke 19. We're introduced to a man named Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus works for the oppressive government. In the imbalance of power, they're under the dominion and authority of Rome, the Roman Empire. And so Zacchaeus works for them. He's employed by them. And by doing that, he's elevated to a place where he exploits people. He exploits them. He's a crook. He's a thug. And he steals from people. And then Jesus is coming through town. Zacchaeus wants to see him, of course. And so Zacchaeus wants to go see Jesus. And Jesus sees him. And so Jesus invites himself over to Zacchaeus' place. He says, hey, I want to come stay at your house. So Zacchaeus says, yeah. Zacchaeus is just thinking more influence, more leverage. Almost, I'm going to exploit the fame of Jesus for his own personal gain. But Jesus has a conversation in mind. Now, it's not recorded what the conversation is, but what is recorded is what happens. There is radical transformation in the soul, in the heart, and in the spirit of Zacchaeus. I mean, it's radical. I mean, we need to understand the depth of the transformation that occurs through a conversation. He went from being a crook and a thug to being a generous person who sees people and then decides, I'm going to pay back everything. And then some, fourfold. So he pays back everyone. And there's radical transformation, which then now Zacchaeus is not in the system, he's changing the system. There's been radical transformation in the soul and the system, all through a conversation. So we ask the question, are conversations enough? Yes. It's where the Holy Spirit lives. It's where the Holy Spirit's working. It's where the Holy Spirit's growing you. It's where the Holy Spirit's transforming people. And in doing so, the system's getting transformed and the system's getting changed. Come on. Is the conversation enough? Yes. It's where Jesus starts. It's where Jesus lives. It's where Jesus is growing you. It's where Jesus is growing me. It's where Jesus is growing everyone. So we need to have it. We need to be in it. That's why last week, come on, in part 1, I said move it from the comments to the conversation. Comments can be one place. But the transformation, the radical soul transformation is going to happen through conversation, person to person, human to human. Level playing ground, level ground. Growing, learning, having the Holy Spirit transform us. Don't skip the conversation. Don't skip the conversation. Now remember, both in accounts, John 4 and Luke 19, both accounts, Zacchaeus and the woman at the well, there is action. The action comes after the conversation. The conversation brings about transformation, which leads them to action. I want to get to action because we need to change. We need a better future. We desperately need it. Desperately. Enough's enough. It's gone on too long. But the Holy Spirit wants to have the conversation. He wants to live in the conversation between people, whether it's online or in person or wherever. Doesn't matter where it's being held. The fact it's being held, the Holy Spirit's working. We see that scripturally. And in that brings about soul transformation, which led both Zacchaeus and the woman at the well to action, led them to doing something. There is a response. The Holy Spirit, through the conversation, moves us to respond. So we are responding. We are responding, but we're doing it at the same time, and we're doing it as we're in the conversation. We're learning, we're growing. The Holy Spirit's increasing our awareness, increasing our compassion. And I love that the conversation's happening. I'm loving that stories are emerging to the forefront of our society narrative, of the global narrative, and there is a lot of enlightening happening. People are becoming very aware, and it's so needed. It's so needed. Let's keep it going. Let's take it from the comments to the conversation. As we go into cruise this week, let's do that. Let's keep this moving. We're believing in the power of the Holy Spirit. to bring about radical transformation in souls and systems.